Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Welcome to Changing Families of the 90s. We have all wondered how to be the very best parent possible. And today, in our studio, we truly do have an expert. His name is Dr. Paul Solomon. He is an author of many different books, but the one we're going to talk about today, and the one that's going to delight you out there, I know, is going to be the book called Feed the Lambs. Thank you for coming, Dr. Solomon.
Thank you.
It's just a delight to have you here in the studio. I know that you travel internationally.
Yes.
And that you do a lot of different seminars. You are a very busy person. And for you to give this half hour, and in fact we're going to do other shows with you yet today, I really do appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure, really.
Thank you. We're going to get right into the show, and that is, parents have a very, very big job. Kids don't come.
The biggest job.
The biggest job.
The biggest.
Kids don't come with a set of instructions. And it is an awesome power that parents can use to develop their families and develop the best potential, not only for mom and dad or single mother, but all of the different children in that family. And you're here today to tell us how to do that.
I'd like to cover some of the real basics. The most basic challenge that parents have is how to know that I'm doing the right thing for the child. We have had confusing sets of instructions. For a while, it was thought we pamper children. Dr. Spock came along and said, don't pamper children, you spoil them. And so a whole group of children, almost a generation, were deprived of being handled a lot as infants, out of this fear of being out of fear of spoiling them.
Sure.
What is the single most important thing that a parent can give to a child? And the answer to that is love. But the problem here is communicating love. Parents do love their children.
Sure they do.
And parents believe that the children know that, and children know that their parents are supposed to love them, and they are supposed to love their parents. And if they don't love their parents sometimes, which is natural, I mean, there are times that I don't feel as much love for my children as I would like to feel, then I feel a bad parent. Children have the same experience with their parents. There are days when they don't love their parents, and children even are notorious for saying, I hate you, when they don't get their way. And parents need to have enough self-confidence to know that's not what the child means. The child does not mean, I hate you. The child means, I'm feeling frustrated, and I need love communicated to me. You know, we're not good at communicating love.
True.
We love, but we think, if I remembered them on their birthday, if I bought them wonderful things, if I provided wonderful opportunities for them, if I touched them frequently, they should know that they are loved. You know, we need to be very direct in our communication of love. We need to say so. Tell the children that they are loved.
And is not the bottom line that the child feels that deep inside?
Yes.
Because we can tell, and we can show, but the real answer is, does that child deep inside feel totally loved, totally accepted?
Loved and accepted,
Yes.
that's it. And here's a problem with that. We have a problem distinguishing between the child and the child's actions.
There we go.
There's a real challenge. Anytime you must criticize a child's action, always praise the child. When you praise a child's action, don't praise the child. And that's something that's a little bit difficult for people to understand. They get mixed up. But let me give you an example. If you come home one day and your child has washed the dishes, cleaned up the kitchen for you, I don't know how unlikely that is, but it does happen sometimes. So you come in and you say, "Oh, you did the dishes. What a wonderful child." That's inappropriate because the child hears, "I'm wonderful when I do the dishes. I am loved when I do something right."
If I produce, then I'm an okay person.
Separate the child from the action as much as possible. When you must criticize an action, criticize it in the strongest possible terms, and don't forget that children are capable from a very early age. Children are capable of learning why something is wrong for them to do. Always tell them why, not just that it's wrong. This is wrong because it's not in your own best interest, and this is the result of that kind of action. And in fact, if we're going to use punishment, which I don't believe in, but if we're going to use punishment, try to design the punishment in such a way that it looks like the result of the action, so that the punishment must be inextricably tied to the action. If you punish a child in such a way as spanking a child for something that they have done, they only feel that you disapprove of them, not their action, but them. You punished them. You didn't punish the action. You didn't cause the action to have a cause-effect result that made them understand that the action is wrong. And punished children resent the punisher. They don't learn that what they did is wrong. They learn to resent the punisher. And they also learn that it is all right to hit people.
Exactly.
And that's not what we want to teach our children.
No, because hitting, if I hit my child, then my child gets the concept in his head that it's okay to hit other people.
Exactly, exactly. And we perpetuate this idea that violence is part of culture. We also teach our children, unfortunately, and we learned this as we were growing up, we were taught that if you feel guilty enough, long enough, and punish yourself enough, you'll become better.
Exactly.
And the truth is, if you feel guilty enough, long enough, and punish yourself, you will have poor self-esteem, you will be weaker, not better, you'll be more likely to repeat the offense, not less likely. We need to learn that guilt, punishment don't work. Cause-effect relationships do work, and what we need most to do with our children is two things. Make them feel loved, help them to know for sure that they're loved. Don't fail to tell them, and tell them that they are loved, not when they've done something wonderful, but at other times, and especially when they need discipline. If you must discipline, praise the child, love the child after the discipline. And that does not take away the effect of the discipline. It reassures the child, I'm still all right, I made a mistake, that's very clear, but I'm still loved and I'm still all right.
So what I hear you say then is, if I need to discipline my child, that's okay, and I can feel that I'm setting the boundaries for that child, and that's very
Yes.
appropriate and necessary.
Children need boundaries.
But the minute that child then acts appropriately, then I need to give that kind of appropriate attention to
I think
reinforce.
even before the child acts appropriately,
Okay.
if we must discipline them, praise them immediately after we have applied the discipline, or even while we're applying the discipline. If the discipline, for example, is grounding for a few days, while that child is grounded, they're suffering.
Oh, sure.
They're suffering being grounded, and that's real for a youngster. Being deprived of freedom is a strong form of punishment, much stronger than we think.
Right.
And while they are being grounded, they do need to be loved at that same time. So love them while they are being grounded, because that will connect the grounding to the action, but it doesn't say, I disapprove of you, the child. I disapprove of the action. That's very different.
Right.
If we can learn that before we're adults, then we can develop self-esteem, and my own self-esteem doesn't need to be tied to my success.
Oh, good. I'm glad you mentioned that.
See?
Tell us more about how that works, because so many people believe that their self-esteem is tied to their product,
Accomplishment.
their accomplishments, and we grow up thinking that in the adult word, if I have a really good job, then I must be a good person, and that is
It doesn't
so
quite work, because even when we do get a good job, we don't believe it. Here's something very revealing. The corporate heads of the Fortune 500 companies, something like 70% of them feel that they have fooled people, that they don't deserve to be there. They feel like phonies, and their self-esteem was not bought by their accomplishment. Even though they are at the head of corporate America, they still don't have the self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence. They're not at peace with themselves. And so we need to untie self-worth from accomplishment. A child is wonderful. All children are wonderful. They are inherently wonderful. And they misbehave. And we need to understand that a perfect child is not one who never gets dirty, is never mean, never too loud, never breaks the rules, and so on. A child who never does any of those things is a neurotic child, not a perfect child.
Right.
A perfect child does all those things, but we want them to experience two things growing up: joy. We want them to be happy. We want them to play. We want them to know that the world is an adventurous, wonderful place. And if they grow up with parents who are constantly worried, but as parents, if we're spiritual at all, religious, we teach our children God provides for us. God will look after you. We teach our children to pray, perhaps. But at the same time, as we are telling them, God loves you and will care for you, when they see us worrying about our bills, worrying about all sorts of things, then they get a double message. Mommy and Daddy say that God loves me and will take care of me, but why isn't God taking care of them? Why are they worrying so much? In order to be a good parent, we must be happy, joyous, adventurous. And a trip that we've put on women that I would like to take away from women is the old belief that a good mother is tied to the kitchen and tied to the children, should be with them all the time. And it turns into something that I call smother love instead of mother love. Children with adventurous mothers, especially girls, with adventurous mothers who are out there in the workplace and enjoying themselves, taking vacations without the children sometimes.
Sometimes.
Sometimes,
Very
not every
necessary.
time, but sometimes. Get away from the children. It's all right to get away from your children. You need it. And you'll be a better parent when you come back after your vacation from the children. You need them to miss you. You need to miss them. And when you come home and find out they had a wonderful time when you were gone and they didn't miss you, don't get alarmed. That's children.
And that also means that I've been a very good parent if they can do without me for 4 or 5 days.
That's really true. That's really true. If they have become confident and they can entertain themselves and they can have joy even without my presence.
And they can adjust to a babysitter or to 14, 15-year-old being helping run the house with an 18-year-old brother while Mom and Dad escape for 2 or 3 days to
That's
go
right.
to the beach. It would be wonderful for
They're
them
going
to
to
have
have to deal with the stress of change in life.
Yes.
Help them to deal with that stress of change in the family. I do believe that mothers should bond, mothers in particular, fathers too, but more important for mothers, should bond with the child for the first 18 months. And that means do your very best to never be out of sight or hearing of the child for the first 18 months, if that's possible, because that helps the child have an inbuilt sense of security. Fear of abandonment is the earliest and most serious fear that children develop, and they carry that through life.
Okay, may I stop you right there? Because
Certainly.
I want to make sure that I understand and that our viewers understand. All right, you were saying for the first 18 months, that mothers should be within earshot and very close.
Close enough.
But you're not saying that mom shouldn't have a half a day off to go and enjoy herself in a 7-day week.
That's right. Mothers do need time off, and if it's possible for the father to be there when the mother has her time off, that's good. The first 18 months needs to be something of a sacrifice. I know there's some women who have to go back to work before that 18 months is up. Don't punish yourself and don't get into guilt trips because you're not there, but do everything that you can to help the child know you do return every day. You are going to be there. Do your best to bond so closely that that child doesn't build a fear of abandonment in those early months. That's very important.
That trust level back and forth is absolutely paramount for their adult mental health, too.
Yes, it is.
And so what you're describing to us here is not only that we will grow wonderful infants and 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds, but that we will grow wonderful adults.
That's right.
There we
Yes.
go. All right.
Self-confident adults, adults who know that it's all right to love themselves. We must teach a child that they are loved. We love them. We must also teach a child it's all right to love yourself. We've had a fear in our culture of that. We have been afraid in the past that loving yourself will make you egotistical.
Right.
Egotism doesn't come from loving yourself too much. It comes from not loving yourself enough and feeling that you must impress people in order to be all right. There is no such thing as too much self-love. Self-love produces all rightness. When I have met my love needs, when I love myself, I can become selfless. That's the interesting thing. It sounds like a paradox, but when I've met my love needs, I am now confident enough to reach out and start to meet your needs.
And so then we begin to give love away in the
That's right.
natural way.
We give love because we have love to give. And we have love to give if we have met our own love needs. I am loved. And when you can't love me, I can be understanding. I don't have to be scared. I don't have to feel unsupported. I can learn that I am my own responsibility. And I can love you instead of needing you. And unfortunately, too many relationships are built upon need instead of love. I can't love what I need. That's different. If I need you, I can't love you. And I become a needy person, and needy people are hard to love. So I can make myself hard to love by being too needy in a relationship. Meet your own love need. Give yourself the love you need to survive, because love is literally a survival need. We know that babies will die, literally, from lack of love. However, we also know that there are love substitutes, and children learn love substitutes very early in life. Children learn, for example, this is the worst thing a child can learn. When I am being really nice, Mommy can ignore me and get her housework done. So if I want concentrated attention, what I can do is kick my sister or pull her hair.
There you go.
Concentrated attention, any form of concentrated attention is a love substitute.
It always happened in my house when I was raising my 4 children that if I had a very busy day ahead of me, it wouldn't make any difference what it was, but if I was very, very busy, I could count on my children being awful from the
Yes.
beginning of the day.
Yes, because
Probably
something
beginning
else
at
is
8
getting your
o'clock.
attention.
Right. And what I used to do is pull down from the top of the cupboard this wonderful box, and I would say to the children, it's very apparent to me that you need my attention. I do have a very busy day, but you need my attention. So right now, let's take time out and we'll turn the clock on the stove and set it for 15 minutes. I'm willing to give 15 minutes now of fun, and then later on we'll have some other 15 minutes. And so focus the attention on the kids, and all the crankiness stopped.
And you're getting the children's agreement with you. They're learning to make contracts when they're doing this at an early age. They're learning to negotiate. They're learning to make contracts and accept their portion of the contract and keep their portion of the contract. These things are part of teaching responsibility, and it's wonderful when you can do that. Also, if you can give children something to do that they believe is constructive, that can make your day easier. Children learn a sense of importance by being able to contribute, not something just to keep them busy, but something that helps them believe that they are actually contributing. Children love to contribute.
It's a basic need to want to be a contributing member of something very big, other outside of myself? Is that not a basic need?
That is the basic need. Everyone needs to believe that it mattered that I was alive.
Right.
Everyone wants to believe that they are here for a purpose. They're on earth for a reason. Even non-religious people need to believe this. I came to do something. And so many people say, if I could just remember what it was. And that's where the people who believe in divine guidance have a real asset there. If I can ask for guidance and get it and believe that I'm meeting a calling.
Yes.
And a calling doesn't have to be a calling to the ministry. We can be called to be a nurse, a mother. We can be called to do anything
To
that
be
is
a good
productive in
neighbor.
society.
You know, it doesn't have to be great. It can be just, I have a calling to be a good neighbor. You
Yes.
know, to be a wonderful, loving, accepting person within even my own neighborhood.
Well, one thing that we can be sure of is that we are called to love, because love is the most precious commodity on the planet. People need love in order to survive. It's a basic survival need. We can give it if we have it to give. We have it to give if we give it to ourselves. If I love myself, you know, Jesus gave a rule that is interesting, and we don't often hear the whole rule that he gave. He said, love yourself, God, and your neighbor equally. He said, love your neighbor as yourself, not more than. He didn't even say love God more than yourself. Love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. Love God and your neighbor as yourself. So loving myself is as important as loving my source. And if I have a loving relationship with my source and myself, I will have a loving relationship with my neighbor, because now I have love to give.
And it is also wonderful, and we could just go on for hours. In fact, we're going to do another show about love and relationships. I have a burning question right now, and that is, how about the single parent? That is a really tough job. Single parent wants to love, wants to care for the children, also
To meet all
has
the needs, yes.
everything that has to be done. It is a very big job. What's your advice to a single parent?
My heart really goes out to a single parent, because parenting is tough enough when you have two, when you have good partnership with both people interested in the child. For a single parent, you need help. You need a support group. Every single parent should be a member of a support group, a group of people who help watch one another's children and help give each other a day off from time to time. Join a support group if you're a single parent. Get some help. Also, a single parent should, if possible, develop relationships with their friends in which they provide aunts, uncles, and cousins to their children, so that their children have more than one adult role model. You can't be the perfect role model all the time. And children need a lot of different role models to choose from, not just one, even if that one is good. They need a lot of options. Children learn by mimicking. They mimic the facial expressions of their parents. They mimic the actions of their parents. And you know, the most fascinating thing is babies, even before they can talk, learn by watching their mother's face. If you put a child on a table like this glass top table, as the child is crawling on the portion of the table that has solid wood under him and he knows that he or she is supported, when they come to the glass portion and can see through, they will automatically look up at their mother's face. If there is no expression on her face, they will go ahead and crawl on the glass. If there's a frightened expression on her face, they will pull back. Now, this is before they can talk. Children are amazing mind readers and experts in body language
They certainly
before
are.
they can even talk. It's amazing. They're wonderful.
There is nothing quite as exciting as watching the infant, as you're describing, grow up into those very precious years, because they really
Watching
do
a child.
teach us
Oh, sure.
what life is all about, don't they?
Sure.
All right. I like your idea that single parents need this support group, and I know that they would all line up to want to be a part of that. How can they manage that, though, in their busy days?
Well, manage that by trading off time with other people in the support group.
Okay.
Support groups are most likely to be found in your church or in some kind of community center. By swapping off, by allowing your children to be cared for with other children by another parent to give you time off, can also be something that you swap off to give them time off. We all need time off from our children, and we don't like to admit that. And we're frightened as parents to admit that I can come to a point of frustration in which I can't stand my children. That's natural. And those are the times when we do need a break. We need to be able to manage a break somehow so that we can catch our breath and come back and be good parents again. Support groups are the best possibility. Daycare facilities, if you can find a good one, that's a good possibility. There's nothing like, you know, we're born to be tribal units. Man has always lived in tribal units. In a tribal unit, you have many adult caretakers, and children have many options of role models to learn from. Now that we come down to families being separated from the extended family, that was a tragedy in itself that happened 40, 50 years ago. More recently, single-parent families have become even more restricted and much fewer opportunities for role models for the children. The single parent must be adventurous, active in life, and take the child with them as they can in their interactions as much as possible. Give the child as much attention as you can, and the attention that you do give to the child, try to make it quality attention. Do, by all means, if you're a single parent, learn a good relaxation technique and practice it as soon as you get home from work. Then give your time to the child. Be sure that you've gotten the stress out first, because children are little psychics, if you'll pardon the expression. Whether you believe in psychics or not, they are intuitive. They know when you're hurting, they know when you're exhausted, and they feel responsible for it.
Precisely. I tell parents that they have little antennas just all over their entire skin system, so they really pick up on,
they are
on
so
that
intuitive.
Anxiety and that kind of trauma. And let's face it, even here in the Metroplexes we're talking, just getting home from work is a challenge.
Can be a trauma, yes. So a traumatized parent comes home to a child that is dependent on that for a source of nurturing.
We have only a couple minutes left. I want very much to cover, what about sibling rivalry? How can we help parents understand the differences of children?
Okay, sibling rivalry comes from our need for love, which has substitutes. If I don't get love, I'll get a substitute. Sibling rivalry means there is a belief among the children that if I get the attention I want, then he can't get the attention that he wants, and vice versa. We must find a way to give both of them a lot of attention, including attention from one another. If we can get children to enjoy doing things for one another, we get a substitute for the rivalry. Sibling rivalry is not essential. It is not something, you know, there are those who believe sibling rivalry is natural, it's already there, there's nothing you can do about it. The fact that you have brothers and sisters means that there's going to be rivalry. That's not necessarily true. If you can give a child concentrated attention, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for concentrated attention from the adult first.
Concentrated attention from the adult. I would love to go on, but we do have to.
Okay.
We'll have another show, however. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I hope you do return. For Margaret Kelson and Family Service, love yourself. Bye. Changing Families of the 90s. My name is Margaret Kelson, Director of Education for Family Service, and we have two very special people here today. We talked with Dr. Paul Solomon one other time, and I'm delighted that we have you here today to talk with us about your relationship with your adopted son, David. David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I had met David at an earlier time. Today is the first time that I've met you, Paul, but I was so impressed with the relationship that you were telling me that you had with your father, and I was so anxious to have you here to show us and to tell us about this very special relationship. I'm going to begin with you, Paul, but before I begin, I think that our viewers out there would be interested to know that both of you are authors. Both of you travel internationally, that you do seminars, that you do speaking. Tell us, David, you're an author, brand new author?
Yes.
Tell us what you do.
Well, I write magazine articles for a bi-monthly magazine out of Michigan. It's called Connecting Link, and their articles concern the mysteries of the ancient cultures and their correspondences, the pearls of wisdom that are contained in each, and relating them together so that people can see the consistencies and the similarities between religions.
Fascinating. And Paul, I know that you have authored some 15 books, and we're going to still have time to talk about the one book called The Meta-Human, but we're not going to get into that just yet. I want to go immediately to this relationship. It's very special. It's wonderful. How did this relationship start? Would you tell us, please, Paul?
Well, it really started when David made known his interest, first of all, in the book of Revelation to me. As a child, although he didn't grow up in a religious family, he had this fascination with the Bible, and particularly with the book of the Revelation. And as he spent his early years, his adolescent years, and even his years in the Air Force studying this book and looking at all of the different commentaries that he could find on it, they were all puzzling. And when I learned of his interest in that and was able to discuss it with him, I gave him some insights, and with the depth of his research, he gave me some information that went together as well. So he first became my student very early on. And our father-son relationship actually happened because I experienced a devastating illness many years ago. And at that time, David was responsible for me. He was my student at the time. He hadn't had a close relationship with his own father. I knew his natural parents and had been a kind of surrogate father to David for quite a long time. But when I went into the hospital, it was David's turn to be the father. I was literally incapacitated for more than 3 years, and so David adopted me legally so that he could look after me in the hospital. So he stayed with me day and night for 90 days in the hospital, and then looked after me for 3 years after that. So we had this long period of incubation of our father-son relationship, in which he really, David, when I first met him, had this dream of growing up. Because he looked so young, he's always looked younger than his years, and he always felt that he was treated like a child, and he wanted so much to be a grown-up. And putting me in that position of being the patient and having him look after me gave him the opportunity to accept responsibility, to really accept it, and to have no choice but to do so and to fulfill that role. It gave him a sense of confidence as an adult, and it brought into our relationship a new kind of balance, because I had had the experience of being his father. He had the experience of being my caretaker and surrogate father.
What a role relationship switch here.
That role reversal was important in building a relationship in which we now have a mutual respect. We can communicate. We are proud of each other.
You certainly are. Tell me, David, you were willing, you said before we went on to the air, that your own relationship with your biological father was difficult,
Yes.
that it was almost, in a sense, abusive. So would you like to share the differences now with our viewers?
It's very interesting. My father, my natural father, growing up was an abused child, very abused child. And in fact, his mother kicked him out of the house when he was only 16 years old, said, "You've got to make it on your own now." And furthermore, he was never told that he was loved, never once in his life. And what happened in my relationship with my father was that he was in the Navy, he was gone quite a bit, and I never saw him much. But when he came home, the thing I remembered was that he would come home and beat me, hit me, for silly things like squirting a squirt gun in a house. And he would save up his whippings. He'd say, "That's 1," and he wouldn't do it. And he would say, "That's 2. When we get to 10, I will give you 10. And it used to frighten me. I used to be very scared of him. At the same time, when he did hit me, I was defiant. And I said, "I'm not going to be on your level." At the same time, in the back of my mind, I really did care for him, but I would never show that. I also learned a lot of things about my father that I did end up in later years use, such as respecting the use of tools and things like that, that I always remembered. When I left that relationship in my mid-teens and joined the Air Force, I was sort of lost. I didn't know where I was going. I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up. That was my dream, actually. I didn't quite succeed in that. I became a B-52 gunner.
Not bad.
Yeah, not bad.
Not
I
bad.
still was able to fly.
Right.
But I had religious dreams as well. I wanted to be a minister, a kind of strange concoction. I left the Air Force as a conscientious objector, and right after I left, I found an interfaith organization which Paul was in charge of, and I began studying the teachings and the ancient mysteries in the Bible because that was my interest. And I guess Paul was, attracted to my commitment to it, and so he began to take me around to the different places that he traveled to. And my first stop was Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii, and that started from there. I began to travel around the world, and one of the first things that Paul taught me was the importance of not feeling guilty about myself.
How very interesting.
I had so much guilt.
If you've been abused, then obviously your whole being is filled with guilt and all of those things that go along with being what will we say?
Yeah, well,
Feeling guilty.
being
and-
abused, the child always feels responsible for
Right.
the parents' emotions and well-being. That's an interesting thing. We grow up with an instinctual feeling. You know, even if a parent dies when a child is young, the child will feel somehow responsible for the parent's death.
Exactly.
There's this inherent feeling of responsibility for one another in a family.
Even in abusive families.
Yes, even in abusive families, and especially an abused child wants so much to get the approval of that abuser parent.
Would you not say, probably more so in an abusive family, you wanted desperately to have the acceptance and the love of your natural father?
Yes, I did.
That's
so,
right.
It's just absolutely fascinating. Can we switch now to how, as the two of you were blending your ideals and your needs and all, how does this all take shape?
Well, we talk a lot. We talk about everything that we do, and we try to create very clear roles in our work. David has his work that he does, which I don't interfere with if I can avoid it. I give him suggestions in how things might work more smoothly, but he has his whole area and he takes care of that. And I actually make it a point not to know, for example, my schedule. When I'm on a tour, I don't know where I'm going to be tomorrow. David does. And I don't know what my appointments are tomorrow. David does. So I made David responsible from the very first day that he traveled with me. I gave him responsibility that was very, very real. It's not a false responsibility. If I had told David, you're in charge of my appointments, but then I keep the knowledge here, he can allow himself to slip. And
So
then he gets my disapproval if he makes a mistake. But that's a substitute for the real thing. If I literally don't know my schedule and he's held responsible for it, then his mistake produces a cause-effect relationship. I don't have to impose disapproval. So he gets disapproval that is natural from his action. And if we can do that as parents, if we can create real situations in which youngsters are responsible for their actions naturally, and the result of their action comes to them naturally without our intervention, then they learn responsibility.
But to back up then, what I'm hearing is that there had to be an incredible amount of trust that was built over years for you to allow yourself to give the responsibility to David.
Yes.
How wonderful.
That's certainly true. I had to be willing to live with whatever mistakes David would make.
There you go.
And
then,
he had to live with them. I lost his clothes many times, twice on one trip.
I love it.
yeah, a lot of things have happened. But another thing is, you know, I don't make tragedies out of things. Things are what they are, and it doesn't matter what they should be. We live with what is, not what should be.
Okay, so parents
So-
really need, as we are doing some talking about parenting and how this whole process needs to work in the average living room, garage, out in the lawns of the American family today, then the key is to develop this incredible trust back and forth from father to son, mother to daughter, mother to son, and you know the whole triangles of relationships. But to love one another enough to develop that strong trust level, to set boundaries, to have some stated and unstated rules that everybody seems to know.
Yes.
Boy, this is a lot you're asking of families, isn't it?
Well, of course it is. And the thing is that we need to give people support when they have made mistakes. For example, David was saying that he has made some major mistakes in working with me. At one point, he had a garage sale and sold all my suits.
That's because he was sick at the
and
time. I thought he would never get back.
I learned that later. I was sick, so nobody expected me to recover. I was that sick, literally, for quite a number of years. When I did recover, I wanted my suits. I was back on the road. I was going to be lecturing, and he had sold them. So the thing that I had to do was, David punished himself enough about that. I didn't need to punish or scold or put trips on him. He was doing that. What I needed was to give him support. And at the same time, if I do a lousy lecture, which I may do from time to time, then I need David's support. So we learn to support each other when, at the very times that the average family, if we can call any family average.
There are no average families,
But too often, families heap abuse upon abuse. By when a person makes a mistake, then we get angry about it, and that's the very time a child that has made a mistake needs support. Now they're going to punish themselves enough.
Right.
We don't have to punish our children. We don't have to make them wrong, exaggerate their wrongs. They need support when they've made mistakes.
The milk was spilled. I'm really sorry, but we need the sponge to clean it up. Yeah,
Right.
We don't need to go into long lectures about if you were more careful, da 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 da. Then that wouldn't happen. Hey, we need a sponge. Yeah.
Parents can't afford to be self-righteous. Children are going to find out at some age that you made the same mistakes they did.
Indeed.
If you can admit that very early, if I can tell David a time when I made a similar mistake so that he feels understood, he knows that I have felt what he feels, And it's, you know, the most wonderful thing that can happen as a parent is to have your son come and ask you for help on a project. But in reverse, David gets a lift when I go to him and ask him for a critique of something that I have just done. If we can reverse that role that way and become, we're still father's son. We respect one another in that relationship. He's married now. I must respect his time with his wife.
That's very interesting.
And,
Yeah.
and his wife has to become my daughter, which she did, and she's Japanese. And so we had an interesting time in blending interfaith, interculture, which is my work. I mean, my work already was interfaith, intercultural ministry.
So you're demonstrating that right into your own family. You've done the
Yes.
weaving. I'm very fascinated, David, with what your emotions must be as you're following in your father's shadow. And some of your emotions as you grew into your role. Tell us what was going on down in your tummy.
Well, Paul being an international figure, it was not too difficult. In fact, following in the footsteps of him and doing the behind-the-scenes work was not difficult. That was easy. In fact, it was a little scary to take responsibility and stand before crowds of people and just make an announcement or introduce him.
Sure.
That was difficult. So that part wasn't difficult. The thing that's been difficult is gaining my own individuality, gaining my own sense that I am who I am and that I have something to offer. I have my own opinions.
And that's what I want to hear about. Okay, let's enlarge upon that.
Yeah.
How are you doing that? How did you do that?
Well, in gaining my own opinions, gaining something that's mine, like learning bonsai.
Okay.
When I went to Japan, one, I got married.
Yes, wonderful.
And that was only a couple of years ago. And second is that I learned the art of bonsai, and I learned it extremely well.
Yes.
In fact, Paul was so impressed with it that he brings my trees to display in front of groups of other people and say, this is what he has done, which makes me feel really good. And I've seen that talent developed, and I've learned other things such as Tai Chi Chuan, which is a martial art, and I've taught that. And I've learned to write, which I've always wanted to do since a child. And I can follow his example without feeling like that I'm in his shadow, that I can be my own writer, and that I can write extremely well.
Now, going back into your early childhood, I think you said just a few moments ago that your dream was to be
An astronaut.
an astronaut. And you said that you achieved a very large part of that by becoming a jet pilot. Is that what you said?
I wasn't a jet pilot, I was a B-52 gunner,
Okay,
but I did have
B-52
flying
gun.
status, and I did fly actually quite a bit.
So now you have changed your goals, but you are feeling very warm and very contented.
Yes.
And very skillful.
Yes.
And without question, you have a harmony within yourself.
Yes.
Keep talking, because I like this.
I want to express so much what I learned from Paul versus my natural father, because one of the things that I gained was this feeling that I am all right.
Right.
When I first came to him, I could not look other people in the eye.
How
I would
interesting.
always look down, because I felt like they were looking at someone who wasn't all right. I was self-conscious about the way I looked. And so, Paul, you taught me so much about feeling confident that I can look other people in the eye and learn to care what they were thinking instead of what I was thinking. And so that was the basis of his work, that I could learn to care so much about what they were doing that I would be involved in what they were doing and learn that ability. And as a result, what other people have seen in me is there's something about David that's caring, that's loving. What is that?
So you were able to lose yourself
Yes.
because you developed this inner peace, this inner love, this inner satisfaction, and so now you can go about your work, go about your the tasks that are
Yes.
that are important to you.
It was interesting to watch this relationship develop, especially when I went to New York City to learn Tai Chi Chuan, because he basically sent me there for a year and a half and saying, okay, I'll stop this relationship here right now, go to New York City and learn what you can learn. and I'll support you financially and emotionally. You go there and learn. So I spent a year and a half there. I could have got married up there. I could have found a relationship and said, this is it. But instead, I did take the time to learn, and I came back with more. And it seemed like every chance that he had, he would take the opportunity to set me up with the best teachers he could find so that I could learn what I could. And for that, I'm eternally grateful.
What I'm hearing is that Paul, as a very good parent, as a very good dad,
Yes.
understood you well enough to know what was important to you, not to him, but to
Yes.
you, and therefore he set upon the process of making it work for you without any kind of sabotage, without any kind of ulterior goals in it for you as a parent. Well, that's pretty special.
Well, for any parent, you want your child, when they go out to take their place in the world, you want them to be competent, confident.
Right.
And I feel for the parents who insist that the child follow in their footsteps. I don't want David to do what I do because I do it.
Exactly.
If he admires me for it, that's fine. If he has a natural talent for it, that's fine. I spent a great deal of time with David asking him, what do you really want to do with your life, more than anything else? And he wanted to be a writer. And at that time, I said to David, you don't have good grammar, and you
truth
love
hurts
to
sometimes.
use flowery words. His prose was awful, really awful. And I talked with him. I showed him, you know, this is what's going on. You love to use pretty words, but they're not saying anything. So do you want to be a writer? If you do, you must train yourself. We all know, David and I have a friend who is a highly talented musician and could be one of the world's great musicians, I'm sure, but he doesn't read music. He takes great pride in playing by ear and so on. But he has lost a professional quality that he could have had with proper training.
His potential,
So-
in other words.
Yes, and so I told David, if you want to write, that's fine. Having a gift for expression is not enough. So I was at an Andres Segovia concert and watching this man playing the classical guitar, and I've studied classical guitar, so it was amazing what this man could do. And I heard a woman behind me say, wouldn't it be wonderful to have such a great gift? And my mind was thinking, this man has worked on that guitar 8 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week, for 40 years, and she calls it a gift. And that's what I pointed out to David. David has a natural talent for bonsai, and he can see what I can't see. I know some of the techniques. I've been able to help him, and I do some criticism on his trees. But he is so much better than I was. I studied bonsai first. David took a natural liking to it, which pleased me a great deal. But I didn't attempt to be his teacher. And in fact, when David came to me to study, as often as I could, I sent him to another teacher, even though I might have been able to teach him some of the same things. I don't think it's a good idea for a doctor to have his child as a patient or his wife as a patient, nor is it good for a teacher to have his son as a student, unless that son also has the benefit of other teachers and the way that they teach.
True.
And the differences in their expectations. But David does have a point of reference for me as a teacher. So he can relate to me as a teacher, and we can drop the father-son relationship while we're in a teacher-student relationship.
Right. I would like to switch just a little tiny bit and get back to something that I think we haven't talked about enough, and that is, David, your sense of how you developed your character, if I
Yes.
can use those words. How did that all mesh, and what was important to you as a child? And I use the word child from a sense of your maturity at that time. That you were an adult, but I think what you were telling me earlier is there was so much left to be developed.
I had a real difficulty in learning to take responsibility. For instance, if I broke something, I would say, "It broke." And Paul would say, "Who broke it?" And I would have to say, "I broke the vase." And that was so difficult. For me to take that responsibility, to say, "I did it," was difficult. And I would watch him, when he made mistakes, he would take direct responsibility. And I'd say, "Gosh, even though the mistake was maybe bad, he looks so good by taking responsibility."
Right.
And I thought, "Gosh, isn't that something?" So he began to criticize me, if I use those words,
Sure.
so he could help me take responsibility. And I learned to say, "I did this, I did that." And it began to feel good. I could take responsibility for something. And another part of the character building process for me was to be criticized without becoming defensive. He would say, "Don't give me excuses for whatever you did. Just tell me what you did." And I would have to not defend myself, just allow him to say something and then listen without coming back. Because often when I would come back with something, I would come back with my reasons why I didn't do it or why I can't do it. And so,
But what I hear is that he asked you to look at the difficulty, then he asked you to think about what perhaps would have been a better idea to
Yes.
carry out or to change this difficulty. Then he asked you to analyze what it was all about so that tomorrow
yes,
would be a better schema, so
Yes.
that you would have something that would work for you not only for tomorrow but for the rest of your life.
absolutely. And it worked.
Perfect parenting. And within that framework then you were able to develop confidence. Tell us more.
I developed confidence, and furthermore, I developed a respect and a love for him, especially during the hospital experience when he nearly died. And I wanted to be there to take care of him, to help him. And I didn't realize how much I was growing during that time, how much responsibility I was taking, and how much love for the Father makes a difference. I mean, I think I could say that I basically saved his life.
I'm sure you did. And I'm sure he feels the same way. I want to go quickly. We have only about 2 more minutes. But do the two of you ever argue?
Briefly.
Recently.
Briefly.
We never go to bed having argued without clearing it. We have that commitment. We're going to finish it. And what we try to get to is, what was this really about? Because people never argue about the real thing that came up. There's a hidden agenda.
Very true.
So we go through to the hidden agenda. What do you really want? Are you asking me to say that I'm proud of you? Are you asking me to allow you to take responsibility? What is it? What is this really about? That's what we look for.
What's the bottom line? Then, in 1 minute or less, how do you wrap it up? How do you bring closure to it?
Well, first of all, we try to see which one of us can come to a conclusion and be satisfied with not having to defend ourselves or go any further. We don't believe in defensiveness. If we defend our actions, we get to repeat them. So what we do is talk back in the sense of, I want to hear you. I want to repeat what I hear you say.
That's so important. I want to hear you.
I want to hear you. Thank you so much for being with us. It has been truly an experience for me to watch the two of you communicate. And for all of you out there, take very good care of yourself. Give yourself a hug, and don't forget to hug the kids. Join us next week. Bye.
Welcome to Changing Families of the 90s. My name is Margaret Kelson, Director of Education for Family Service, and guess what I'm going to talk about today with a very wonderful person, author, worldwide traveler, lecturer, Dr. Paul Solomon, who has written The Meta-Human, and this is a fascinating study. What is the meta-human potential that you talk about? I not only have a book, but I have a series of tapes.
Yes, a workshop.
An entire workshop, isn't it?
Yes. The metahuman, I've used the word, of course, from metamorphosis, and there are some similarities to what the Christians talk about in being born again. You know, we form our personalities when we're 3 or 4 years old.
For sure.
And I have a belief that a 30-year-old is much more capable of forming the personality that he wants than a 3-year-old. But it doesn't occur to us that we can remake ourselves as we grow up. The human potential movement is the movement of taking responsibility for your life. And in fact, there's an ancient ritual called the bar mitzvah, the bas mitzvah,
Yes.
that the Jews practiced, many other cultures practiced it, and I think the Christians should too in this sense. We need a day at which we can become adults and forgive our parents all their mistakes that they made in our growing up, accept responsibility for our own personality and our own neuroses, and past that date, we should no longer be allowed to say, I'm this way because of the way I was potty trained.
Trust me that our parents out there are clapping.
Yes, absolutely. We need to give our parents some freedom from the mistakes that they made in parenting. All parents make mistakes. And an old school of philosophy, or psychology, excuse me, an old school of psychotherapy was, whatever your neurosis, it's your mother's fault. It's the way she trained you. Now, we're old enough to take responsibility for ourselves, for our own emotions. If I'm willing to love myself, I'm willing also to realize you're not responsible for how I feel. I don't get the luxury anymore of making you responsible. If I make you responsible for my anger, I make myself a victim. There's no way around it. So I can't say, you hurt my feelings, you made me angry. That has never happened. It never will happen. If you don't do what I want you to do, I can be angry if I want to, but it is my choice. It always will be. So victim consciousness is not real, it's not valid.
In other words, so we humans, each and every person on this planet, really has the potential and the need and the responsibility for accepting who we are, what's happening, and you are not responsible, my teacher is not responsible, my parent is not, my husband is not, da-da-da, right?
They're not responsible for our emotions.
Emotions.
Now, they are, of course, responsible for their actions and the situations that they put us in. I am responsible for the way I feel, and I'm responsible for the way I make you feel. I cannot hold you responsible for the way you make me feel
There we go.
unless I want to be a victim.
Right.
And I don't want to be a victim.
Okay.
If I don't want to be a victim, all I have to do is take responsibility every moment of every day for how I feel and why I feel that way. Emotions are not just something that just happen to you. They're something we do. We do emotions. They are goal-oriented activity, and we want a result from our emotions. We get angry because we want something to go our way. It rarely works. That's the interesting thing about the negative emotions. If I get jealous, it's because I want you to give me more attention than you're giving something else. But jealousy makes us ugly. So it doesn't work. Have you ever seen a jealous person that looked beautiful or radiant? That we make ourselves unattractive in our attempts to attract someone else. Negative emotions are ridiculous. They don't work. There's an old school of psychology that says we should get our negative emotions out. My theory is we shouldn't put them in there in the first place. They're not comfortable to experience or to live with. They don't work. They don't get us what we want to get. And we are deciders. We can decide what we feel based on the stimulus.
Okay, so let me work through this. If I have a negative emotion about X, it doesn't make any difference what it is, then how can I not allow it to permeate me?
What I suggest-
Tell us the little steps that has to work.
Okay, there's something I call a 9-step process that goes with this. And the first thing that I do is identify the fact that I have changed the way I felt. Notice the change. That's step 1. Number 2, what was the catalyst for the change? Not the cause. Don't use the word cause here because that's not what caused. What did somebody else do that was the catalyst for triggering a new emotion in me?
Okay.
What is my belief about that? If you did something and it caused an emotional reaction for me, I have to have a belief about what you did. I have to believe, for example, you can call me a name. This is perhaps this is a good illustration. If I met you a few minutes after our talk here, looked you right in the eye and called you stupid, it would change your blood chemistry if you're a victim. And in fact, that would be victimization. But if I would call you stupid, that means that I am deliberately trying to hurt you.
You're trying to push my buttons, as they say.
And if I would deliberately try to hurt you, I am by definition your enemy. Now, if I can say the word stupid and change your blood chemistry, then I, your enemy, am more in charge of your emotions than you are. That's not a good place to live, but that's where about 5.5 billion people live on this planet today. Victims all over the place. You can change their blood chemistry by just a look in your face or a word, an expression. We shouldn't be that way. My emotions are mine, and I feel the way I want to feel. And happy people are habitually happy. Unhappy people are habitually unhappy. And if you take an habitually unhappy person, put them in the best situation you can find, they'll be happy for a few minutes.
For a few minutes.
Then they'll find something to gripe about. They'll go back to their habit of being unhappy. But if you take a happy person, put them in the worst situation you can find, they'll be unhappy for a couple of minutes, and then they'll think, why should I be in this miserable situation and be unhappy too? And they'll go back to their habit of being happy because it's the way they want to feel.
That's
and
the
it's
key,
a
isn't it?
healthy way to feel.
Yeah. All right. So we have to choose our own happiness. Am I on the right track?
Yes.
And if we choose our own happiness, then we can choose how we're going to think and how we're going to feel and what our reactions are to the environments, to
Yes.
you, to everybody else. But ultimately, we have control over what goes in our head and will be affecting our feelings and our thoughts. Therefore, bottom line is, I get to choose my own climate. And I use the word climate as I can choose to be serene, I can choose to be angry with you, I can choose to, so what,
That's
I'm
right.
sorry that he does not like me, but that's okay with me.
I don't have to suffer. You know, and we need to make a point here. We're not talking about suppression and we're not talking about denial.
No.
I'm not saying suppress your emotions. I'm saying know why you're feeling what you're feeling. Know what your beliefs are about it and know that you can change that. You can't make me feel anything that I don't want to feel. If I don't want to feel it, it's not a matter of suppression. It's a matter of choice. When someone treats me unkindly, there's one thing that I should know. No one is ever unkind when they're feeling good.
Oh,
If they're feeling
important.
loved, if they're feeling all right, they won't be unkind. It's not natural for a human being to be unkind unless they're in pain. If they're in pain, that's a symptom. It is not appropriate for me to catch their disease. I want to be a healer instead of catching their disease.
Yeah.
But anger and jealousy and hurt and all of these things, they're the most contagious diseases in the world. We can catch them in a moment. Or we can decide, When that person calls me an ugly name, especially people I love, it's often said we hurt the ones that we love, and we do, and we hurt them because we want attention. We hurt them to let them know that we're in pain. It is appropriate for us to hear the pain signal. If you're unkind to me, what I should hear is, Laura Huxley, wife of Aldous Huxley, wrote a wonderful book years ago, and all you need to know about the book is the title. Her title was, "You Are Not the Target." When I'm unkind to you, you are not really the target. My pain is the target.
That's the bottom line, isn't it, as they speak in business? The bottom line is look for the bottom result of what is causing our pain. If we are unhappy and we are transferring those kinds of emotions onto others.
Yes, and also look at what's the bottom line on the other person's pain. If they're being unkind to me, I want to know, first of all, I'm not the target. I'm not their pain. What is their pain? If I can be compassionate instead of catching it. When someone is unkind to me and I fire right back, we have two diseased people. Dis-ease is lack of ease. So I don't want to catch your symptoms. I don't want to catch your illness. I want to be compassionate. I want to heal you. If you're unkind to me, what I know is you're hurting. I don't want to add to your pain. Let me take some of your pain. Let me help to heal you. Let me help to make a difference. Let me relieve the situation if I can. If we can all see ourselves as healers, then we can begin to heal some of the pain on the planet. We could change some things about this planet. For example, this idea, nobody is ever unkind unless they're hurting. It's also true that people find love substitutes early in life. A child finds out if he's behaving wonderfully, he can be ignored. Mommy can get her work done while the child is behaving.
Right.
But if the child misbehaves, they can get concentrated attention. Concentrated attention in any form is a love substitute, including punishment. Children would rather be punished than ignored, and so would adults, and that's where the criminal mind comes from. I have this belief, if we could abolish prisons altogether, turn them into institutes of self-love, self-worth, self-respect, self-esteem, institutes of self-esteem. The average IQ of the criminal, the average IQ in prisons is higher than the average IQ per capita outside prisons. We have some brilliant people in there.
We truly do. And
what if we gave them self-respect?
Yeah. What if we gave, I know that your philosophy is give them love, give them their self-respect, give them their self-esteems back again, or maybe they never had a healthy self-esteem. How would you go about doing that?
Teach them to love themselves. Now, in order to teach a person to love themselves, we're going to need to give them some love first.
Okay.
So find a way to give love and allow that other person to believe it. That's a hard thing. Those who have been denied love for most of their lives deny the need for love, number one, and are suspicious of giving love, number two. So it's hard to love them. So we need to learn how to be loving and supportive to people who don't deserve it, who have not earned it. We are all wonderful creatures. Even the worst hardened criminal is intricate, delicate, fascinating, highly responsive, absolutely wonderful piece of equipment. An experiential unit, I call it, a body with a mind.
Okay.
And this is a great gift from God. People deserve love because they are wondrous creations. So if we can give them some love, then teach them. Love is a survival need. When other people don't give it to you, give it to yourself. You are ultimately your own responsibility. So men in prison who want to be very macho, tell them, be responsible for yourself. Be responsible for the love you need. Admit the fact, if you're strong enough, if you got guts enough to do it, admit that you need love, because you do. The most hardened person has a little child inside that desperately wants and needs love. If we can learn to meet that love need and get that person to meet their own love need. Now, this is not just in prisons, but
No.
also in hospitals.
Well, in
You know,
just human life.
patients will get well for their doctors. If they believe that the doctor loves them, a patient will get well for the doctor. We need to take that another step. The patient should get well for himself,
For himself.
for herself.
Right. So we hear the word reparenting a lot. So I think what you're talking about is reparenting and the parenting process beginning with even before birth
Yes.
of being appreciative of what's going on. And
We are parenting all of our
All
lives.
of our
We all
lives.
have an inner child,
Yes.
and the parenting needs of our inner child are the same as children out there. For example, criticism doesn't work. When people feel criticized, they rebel, they make excuses. It doesn't make them better. Praise works. Praise the child, praise the actions that are good. Give little attention to wrong actions except just to point out that they are wrong, that they don't work in your own self-interest. And if you're going to point out a wrong to a child, point out why it doesn't work in the child's own best interest. And if you can get them to see that, they will drop that action because they don't want it.
they really
They
want
won't drop
to,
it because you forced them to or because you punished them.
Right. They want to please. Little children want to please.
They do want to
I tell
please.
teachers that the negatives, if you have to criticize, then one criticism deserves 4 positives immediately, as quickly as possible.
Yes, and
To-
when you criticize, always criticize the action, not the child.
True.
And when you praise, always praise the child, not the action.
Right, right. I'm interested in some other parts of the MetaHuman book and your tapes. And you were
Okay.
talking about self-talk. What is self-talk?
Self-talk is the way we think. We're talking to ourselves right now. You and I, we carry on a conversation in our mind, and it is not a unilogue, it is a dialogue. So there are at least 2 in there talking back and forth to one another. Now, if they talk to one another in hate, in guilt, in self-punishment, self-condemnation, we do that because we've been taught that punishment makes us better. So we punish ourselves inside. If we stumble on a sidewalk, we can instantly say stupid to ourselves.
Clumsy
We're calling
person.
ourselves a name. It doesn't work. It weakens us. It makes us feel worse instead of better. And that's what I call living in the kingdom of hell. It's hell when you are punishing yourself. Learn to live in the kingdom of heaven by learning to live with your source, who is love, communicate with love, support yourself, and have a supportive relationship in your self-talk. You'll become powerful, confident, and get things done. This is part of the metamorphosis that makes the metahuman. There are 3 kinds of humans. I call them average humans, possible humans, and metahumans. A possible human is a person who has proved that something is possible for a human to do that has been thought impossible before they did it. Roger Bannister and the 4-Minute Mile is a classic example. Or Evelyn Wood, who taught us that it is possible to read at a rate of 3,000 to 30,000 words a minute when the average college graduate reads at the rate of 350 to 450 words a minute.
Yes.
So these are possible humans, but then there's the metahuman. A metahuman, by my definition, is a person whose life will change the course of history. There are 4 that I'd like to mention just very briefly. One is a man, an uneducated man in Pakistan. His name is Mr. Eddy, E-D-D-H-I. Mr. Eddy is a Muslim. He grew up the child of a retarded woman, and in his particular sect of Muslim, there was a belief that if a man is blind, you should kick him. You should not be more kind to him than God is. He's blind because he's being punished. So this child grew up seeing his mother being rejected by society and being punished because she was mentally retarded. And at age 16, with no education, this man set out to change this situation in Pakistan. He found a battered old ambulance and and prayed and asked to be taught how to fix it. And he fixed the engine, got this ambulance running, started driving around Pakistan, picking up people beside the road. And before you know it, he had arranged for 1,600 bed shelters, of which he now has 30. And people that he had picked up from the side of the road became ambulance drivers for him. He has a fleet of 300 ambulances. He has rescue helicopters. He has the largest social welfare system in the world that is not run by a government or a government agency and receives no government funds. Now, this is a man without an education.
I can understand what you're saying when you're saying that if we practice the principles that you've outlined here, we all have the potential to change the world.
Yes, and what I'm saying is that there's something beyond human potential that we can claim. Possible human is a person who has proved what it's humanly possible to do. A metahuman is a person who has proved what it's possible to do in communication with our source. With God's cooperation, we can do things. Mother Teresa is my favorite example.
Okay.
That woman has changed the world, and I don't think she's done it by herself. She had God's help. She knows that she has God's help.
Certainly.
But she's not making Catholics out of people.
Mm-hmm.
She is loving people. She's gone beyond changing people's religion. She gives people love, and love as I see it, I identify love as a living being with whom we can have a friendly relationship and we can talk with love. I talk to love every day. And whether we're Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Muslim, we can all talk with this wonderful presence that I call living love. Have love as a friend. I also have truth as a friend. And I talk to truth as a friend. And not saying that I know the truth in terms of facts or statements, but I have a friendly relationship with truth so that I ask to know the truth, and truth can communicate with me. So if we can personify these principles that we want to cooperate with and partnership with in our lives, we can go beyond human possibilities and accomplish things that are said to be humanly impossible.
So what, for the average human being, there are no average human beings, we've talked about that before, but how would a person begin the process? First steps.
Okay,
And,
first step, love yourself.
okay.
Give yourself love. And people ask how. There is no how. There is no how to love anybody. There's something that we call falling in love. It's interesting that we attribute that to falling. Fall in love with yourself because you deserve it, because you need it, because nobody else can provide the love that you need, because it's your responsibility. Love is a survival need, and it is your own responsibility to meet your survival needs. Give yourself love, number one. Number two, relax.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. As I remember on the tapes, you said that love does not have to be an entire month, year, 4 or 5 year process. We can learn to love ourselves rather quickly.
Right now.
Tell us about that,
Give yourself
because I
the
think
love
that's
that you
important.
need right now. Well, there are a lot of workshops and writers and so on, psychologists, pop psychologists, telling people, learn to love yourself. And I'm saying, don't learn to love yourself. Drop the learning process, just do it.
Okay.
It's all right not to just learn to love yourself. It's all right to succeed. I know a lot of people who come up to me and say, I'm learning to love myself. And what I hear them doing is bragging about how humble they are.
Oh, okay.
So that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear people succeed in loving themselves.
So don't try, just do it.
Just do it. Because once I've given myself the love that I need, I can become selfless. Now that's the interesting thing. It
Okay.
sounds like a contradiction, but saints are selfless. They care about others. They can care about others because their love needs are met. I've taken care of myself. I am loved, whether you love me or not. And if you don't love me, I know it's just because you don't know me well enough. I am lovable. I love me, I've taken care of that. So I don't hold other people responsible for loving me. I don't make a contest out of it.
Okay.
Are you going to love me? If not, I'm going to withhold my love. No contest.
All right.
It's all right if you don't love me. So now, with my love needs met, I can give myself to the world and I can start to make a difference. When we love ourselves, our source, and others equally, then we have access to the power of living love. We've learned recently that love is literally an energy. It has characteristics that no other known energy has. Dr. Dolores Krieger, professor of nursing at New York University, proved by drawing blood samples that the laying on of hands touch of a loving nurse can change the hemoglobin count and the oxygen level in the blood.
Change blood pressure and everything else.
Yes, absolutely. So there is something called a healing touch. There's an energy that can be transferred even at a distance, long distances. The Soviet scientists, I don't know if I have time to tell this, but I'll tell it really quickly.
We do.
They connected a mother rabbit to biofeedback equipment and killed her babies. And they did this at a distance, so the mother rabbit had no way of knowing when a baby rabbit died, but she reacted every time. And the Soviet scientists went to ridiculous lengths with this experiment. They took baby rabbits to the bottom of the ocean in a submarine, lead-lined submarine, in a Faraday cage, electromagnetically charged, and killed baby rabbits. 500 miles away, the mother rabbit reacted every time a baby rabbit was harmed. Now, this energy traveled faster than the speed of light. There was no time lapse between the death of the baby rabbit and the reaction of the mother. So it's the only energy that travels faster than the speed of light, has no known barriers, lead, electromagnetic cage, seawater, rock, earth, so on. It just travels. We've got a dynamic energy here, which could as easily be called life as love. If I life you, that's a practical word to use. I can life you by making you more alive. How can I do that? If I make you smile, if I lift your spirits, I've made you more alive. Not only that, I've healed you. That's a healing process. When you feel more alive, your own internal defense system has gone to work. Your immune system is strengthened when I make you more alive. And I can do that by doing such simple things as giving you a hug, giving you a compliment, smiling, causing you to feel better in whatever way I can.
With
we can
total
start doing
sincerity
that,
and the need to...
yes, it must be sincere.
Yeah.
If I'm going to give you a compliment, it must be sincere, because
I think
people
that-
are psychic. They can spot a phony in a moment.
I think that's a really important thing. Yes, in 1 minute or less, if you could change the world, what would you do?
I would banish prisons and establish institutes of self-worth and self-love. I think I would get rid of hospitals, and especially get rid of giving people names for their symptoms so that they can hang on to their disease. It's not your disease. Turn loose of it, let go, let God have it, let it dissipate, whatever, but release it. Don't believe that you must be unhappy.
We've enjoyed it, every single minute of it, and it seems like we just sat down, but obviously we have to go. So for those of you out there, Family Service does thank you for watching. Please join us next week. Take good care of yourself, give your kids a hug, and bye.